everybody. In this video, we're going to talk about what gerrymandering is, and this will help you with your gerrymandering project. So take 3 deep breaths and let's make this math easy. All right, so gerrymandering is a less than honest political practice where the boundaries of the voting districts are manipulated in order to either advantage or disadvantage a certain political party or a certain group. And the reason why it's called gerrymandering is because in 1812, the governor of Massachusetts, whose last name was Gerry, created a district in the Boston area that kind of looked like a salamander. You can kind of see right here like a drawing of this boundary. And as you can see, this boundary for this voting district does not really look very logical. It's kind of like weird and squampus, and like it doesn't necessarily look like it was just splitting the area up into equal sized pieces. And the reason why he did this was because it favored his political party. And so to see an example of how gerrymandering works, let's look at this situation. And let's say that for whatever political thing they were voting on, let's say that maybe 40% of the population was going to vote yes, and maybe 60% was going to vote no. And they were split up into precincts or neighborhoods where most of the people in the same neighborhood kind of agreed. Because that tends to happen a lot where you have different economical situations and things like that. And it's very common that people that live in the same area will tend to have similar political views. And so if we look at this entire group of neighborhoods, we would think that if you split it up into districts, that the districts should approximately follow this same proportion of people that agree versus disagree. And so a fair way or a proportionate way to split this up would be to split up the districts like this. Because if you look at how the districts vote, 3 of them would vote yellow or no, and 2 of them would vote green or yes. And there's many ways you could split it up in a proportionate way. You could also split it up like this, where 3 of the districts would vote yellow and 2 of them would vote green. However, a disproportionate outcome, which is what gerrymandering is when you manipulate the borders in a way that kind of skews the result one way or the other. So, for example, you could split them up like this. And because each of the districts has 6 yellow boxes to 4 green boxes, then that means that all 5 districts would win with the yellow. Or you could also draw districts that skew it in the opposite way. Because if you drew your districts like this, then you would have 3 green districts and 2 yellow districts. And so that's kind of the idea of gerrymandering, is that if you manipulate the boundaries in a certain way, you can kind of skew the results of the election or whatever issue is up for vote. So there's several different ways that this can happen. So take, for example, this simplified version where you have some blue squares and some red squares that represent different neighborhoods that are maybe Democrat versus Republican. And in this case, there's an equal number of red and blue squares. And so you would expect, if you're going to split it up into 4 districts, that you should have 2 red districts and 2 blue districts. That would be a proportionate way to split up these districts. However, if you manipulate the boundaries a little bit, you can make it so that you actually have 3 blue districts and 1 red district. Because if you put all of the red neighborhoods, or not all of them, but a lot of red neighborhoods all into one district, then that district will vote red, but then there's not enough reds in the other districts to compensate for all of the blues. And so the blues would be overrepresented. And you could also set it up in a way where the red would be overrepresented. Because if you take this blue area in the center and you split it up between several different districts, then that basically like dilutes the voting power of that blue area. And so that would make it so that the red would win more of the districts than the blue would, even though there's an equal number of red and blue districts. And you can see examples of this in real life if you look up different voting districts. So this voting district is an example in Illinois. And if you look at the boundaries of it, you can see that this is a gerrymandering situation because the boundaries are really weird looking. It's like that isn't like a natural way that you would split up a city, because it's like you've got this weird part in the center that isn't even part of the voting district, even though you've got houses and neighborhoods on both sides of it that are in the voting district. And you can see this in many situations if you look up the voting district boundaries and just look at the map. Because it's pretty obvious when the boundaries have been skewed or drawn in a certain way that may favor a certain group over another. And this is an issue that came up recently in Utah because in November 2018, there was a proposition on the ballot that was designed to help prevent gerrymandering. Because there was some concern that there was some gerrymandering happening in Utah where the Salt Lake area was essentially being split up into multiple different districts. And the Salt Lake area is much more democratic than the rest of Utah is. And so there is some concern that basically that area was getting split up and it wasn't being fairly represented. And this proposition did pass, and then later it was modified. And if you want to, you can go and research more about it. But this is an issue that is relatively recent, and it's also really important that we make sure that gerrymandering isn't happening, regardless of which side of the political spectrum you're on, because it can happen both ways depending on which party is in power. So like in Utah, which is more Republican, it's more likely that gerrymandering would happen in a way that favors Republicans because they're the ones in power. But in other places, it happens as well to favor Democrats. So it happens on both sides, but it's really important that we make sure that it doesn't happen because we want to make sure that everyone's voice is fairly represented. And so if you'd like to research that more on your own and learn more about some of those results, you're welcome to do that. But for your project, you guys are going to practice being gerrymanderers. So we wouldn't want to actually do this in real life because it makes it so that people are unfairly represented. But it will help you kind of understand the strategy of how this works in some simplified examples. So what you'll be given in your project is you'll be given a simplified state. And in the state, you'll have a certain number of red houses and a certain number of blue houses that represent Republican neighborhoods versus Democratic neighborhoods. And in the instructions, you'll be told how you want to draw the districts to favor one party or the other. So that's the goal with the project. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to help you out with it.